Do make sure to hold the mic just under your chin. Okay, I have a few questions, but most of the questions are gonna have to come from y'all. So be sure to be thinking of questions as we go through this, but I'll start us out. So for your organization, some, if not all of you, are responsible for what the vision is, even if that's not in your formal job description. So what is your vision for your own organization, and how did you come up with that vision? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so up until about a year ago, and even continuing now, most of what would be considered high-performance computing or research computing has been rather distributed. It consisted of workstations in people's labs or under their desks, or we have some departments like computer science who have and starts over the years to kind of facilitate some of that. And while they've done an excellent job, we're starting to see a real uptick in potential use cases and needs for these types of things. And so in my role as instructional technologist.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it says it.
This microphone is much softer. Shout into the microphone. And whoever's turning that audio on, turn it back off, please.
Shout into the microphone. Okay, is this better? I don't think the microphone is working.
Did the battery run out?
Either that or it's a solid red light.
You got a red light on it. I'll put another battery in, but keep going.
I'm thinking the room audio is not somehow connected. It's not connected.
What is not connected?
The room audio is not connected to that one. Well, the room audio in general is not working.
In what way?
In that only the one and on the microphone in your.
Well, all right, hang on. Keep going.
Okay, so I'm going to try to make this work. I'm going to talk a little bit loudly. I'm sorry for those in the room especially, but my role as an instructional technologist with Lafayette has me talking with faculty how technology can be leveraged to assist their teaching especially, but also their research and their scholarship. And so one thing I was noticing is that a lot of people were doing research that I knew could be augmented by higher performance computing, and that they weren't taking advantage of those, either because they didn't know that they could do so, or they didn't have kind of the expertise or training or experience or comfort level to do that. And so part of my vision right now, and the way that we've been executing on it, is just to do needs assessments and to work on developing our internal structures, like getting involved with the Campus Champions program and Exceed, and really just surveying the faculty, because any vision that ITS might have, which I don't claim to own, because we talked a little bit about that yesterday, that I don't think it's sufficient for us to sort of invent a vision for what HPC resources on campus might look like in the absence of strong faculty input. So we've been trying to get structures in place to make that assessment as useful as possible, so that we can roll out something that's going to be embraced rather than sort of being prescriptive about it. We want to be receptive to what those needs are. So we're kind of in that process right now of trying to assess what that might look like and figure out how to roll things out in a way that's not too heavy-handed, but that does meet our research needs.
So 7, 8 years ago, U.S. Geological Survey didn't have a central research computing program or computing program or anything like that, much like you would see at Department of Energy or NOAA or NIST or anything like that. So it was fairly obvious to us that there was a need. A lot of the researchers we had were going to universities or begging time on DOE machines, and we knew that wasn't right. And we needed a capability that we could throughout the year, throughout career as a scientist. And so we took the obvious step of kind of moving forward, and we knew it was going to be a slow process. So as we move forward in this, we were very careful to say that we are after research and not supercomputing, because we did not want to give the idea that this was going to be a $100 million, $200 million survey. Didn't want to do. So the idea behind that was to make sure that it was palatable and take baby steps and turn the knob one click at a time and not go from 0 to 10. And we're still under that program, under that path, and we're still looking forward to moving that. We're introducing our second machine here probably in the next 6 months. And then we'll have a pipeline of talent that goes from we recruit students all the way up to we have senior researchers that are productive on a capability, whether it's a supercomputer that we house in-house, or whether it's a computer that's on the DOE facility or something in the cloud. It doesn't matter to us. As long as we have the researchers that are productive. In this case, then if it's a natural disaster that's happening, and we want to make sure that people aren't struggling to get their code working. They know it works well. All they got to do is plug their parameters in. The same thing with disaster response after the fact. They don't need to be developing the code. They need to be actually doing the science behind it. So we want to make sure they're productive before the events require them to be productive.
I guess my story starts a while ago. I actually, as an undergraduate, started out with an interest in computer science and math. And that interest kind of carried on into my career. I actually did my doctorate in education and found my way back into the STEM fields. While I was a faculty at the University of Illinois in Champaign, I was there for quite a while, actually, like 16 years. I started my career there. And while I was there, I got involved with the NCSA. And at NCSA, I was a faculty fellow a couple of times because I was still interested in computing and got more involved with the center there as a fellow, doing some work there. Also got involved with some other work at the Beckman Institute, and it was sort of a passion of mine as an assistant professor. I found that there were a lot of challenges with me getting a degree in social sciences and my doctorate in social sciences, and I didn't have the support that I really needed. I managed to connect with a couple of faculty at NCSA that were very supportive, as well as some IT individuals that were very supportive of the work in my area of interest. From there, I ended up landing a position at the National Science Foundation as a program officer, and while I was there, I said, they don't have enough women. They definitely don't have enough women of color. And from that, I actually started becoming more interested in computational sciences. I got involved with the SEES program there, which is focused on environment, sustainability, and interest, and saw that there was some work actually being done there. And myself, I moved over to UNLV. I became an associate dean of research and a campus champion. I've also been a recipient of several XC projects, funded projects, and some of the work and interest that I've been doing. And I'm actually, I have to shout you out, Sandra, because Sandra and I, from our meeting here last year, we actually have submitted an NSF grant that is being funded. So I think that working with people, networking, talking about your ideas, and getting people to buy in, making it an interdisciplinary team. I think all of these things are really, really important. And as I moved to UC Santa Barbara, what I found is that I'm leaving education completely, and I'm going into Black Studies, which is not an area normally that I've done research in. But I figure that it's important to take the STEM field, especially computational sciences, to Black Studies. Black Studies has typically been an area of the focus on social sciences and humanities, and they don't have any information or knowledge about supercomputing. So my goal there is to make the center one of the go-to places, especially for ethnic and Black studies, because I'm in the position as the director and bringing it more into Black studies scholarship. I think people don't think enough about the social sciences as well as the humanities in terms of computational sciences. I'm also interested in computational neuroscience, where I'm actually going to be working with someone at UCSB, because I decided also that when I was doing my trek and moving around the different areas, I was interested in neuroscience, and I'm teaming up with some people there to actually probably train undergraduates, especially Black studies majors in computational sciences. So I hope that work out. That's my vision for that center, because most centers for Black studies in the United States, no one has ever focused on computational sciences or STEM fields.
Excuse me. So I am responsible for planning cyber infrastructure and cyber infrastructure outreach for our EPSCoR Track 1 proposals for the University of North Dakota, and we could do that in conjunction with my counterpart at North Dakota State University. I should say I've been pretty much had that role at some level or another since I was hired about 10 years ago. One thing that I put a lot of emphasis on is increasing the amount of staff support we have, because I often have a lot of people who come into my office asking for help, and for various reasons, either because I don't have enough bandwidth or we don't have the right hardware or environment for them, I have to turn them down. So in the last couple of years, the State Board of Higher Ed has chosen to focus programs in unmanned aircraft systems, cybersecurity, high performance computing, and big data. So as part of that, I've been asked to work with my counterpart at North Dakota State University to develop a statewide plan for the future. Of course, that happened right at the time that oil tanked and the university system was told to do 20% budget cuts. But that didn't really affect me too much, because our governor directed the universities to increase research computing. So over the past past 2 years or so, we've been trying to develop a path forward with some increased funding for us while the rest of the university gets budget cuts, how to grow our program.
Thanks. I'll jump into the panelists. So I've never been sophisticated about any of this. So when they first said, Henry, you're in charge, it was me and one other person, and the other person knew how to do everything useful, and I knew the rest. And my vision was, we're going to be the group that helps people get stuff done. A shocking amount of my professional philosophy is derived from the movie Ghostbusters. How many of you have seen the movie Ghostbusters? The first one, right, 1984? Okay, so there's that scene where he's trying to get a date with Sigourney Weaver, and he says, Pete Venkman is a guy who gets things done. So that's what my vision for our center. We help people get things done. And fundamentally, our job is to keep our stakeholders productive and delighted. And each one of us has a different mechanism for doing our job. So the research computing facilitators help people be productive and delighted, our stakeholders be productive and delighted by sitting with them and helping them do things. Our systems folks help our stakeholders be productive and delighted by making sure that the machines are working. And of course, there's a lot of overlap in all of that. But ultimately, the idea is that we've got I realize that's an overly simplified mission and an overly simplified vision, but that's honestly as smart as I get. Now, what happens sometimes is randomly I will have an idea about a thing, ideas at random times, and a random percentage of them are clunkers that are not worth pursuing. Sometimes I can tell that's true, sometimes not. And then the ones that are good, if I keep pushing on them, eventually they happen, and then either I'm happy to say that I'm not wrong that often, but that's mostly self-serving in the sense that if I detect that I'm being wrong, I stop doing it, right? So I'm cheating my way to 100% success rate. I pretend that I never had that idea in the first place. But my sense of vision is not terribly sophisticated. It's, oh, that would be a useful thing. So for example, we did the proposal writing apprenticeship, right? How many of you participated in that? I'm just curious. Okay. So that idea, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, came from, gee, I learned to write proposals by writing proposals or co-writing proposals with somebody who knew how to write proposals. Well, now I know how to write proposals. Why can't I teach other people how to write proposals by writing a proposal with me? That is the sum total of my brilliant idea. Literally it. But that taught 59 other people how to write grant proposals. Now, different levels for different ones depending on their amount of participation. You know, there's the old line from the Honeymooners, Ed Norton, the sewer worker, says, life is like a sewer. What you get out of it depends a lot on what you put into it. So the proposal writing apprenticeship, what you got out of it depended a lot on what you put into it. And the people who participated deeply, so for example, do you want to tell real quick, Hussein, what happened as a result of participating in that? Can you tell?
Yeah, so...
and shout real loud. The microphone will pick you up.
So after that, I helped writing another grant on my campus, and we are like 95% on approval now for that. It was all because of this workshop that I planned in the training that came after and I signed on. It was almost after the ACI last year,
right,
that we opened the writing one. And we did it.
Right, and it purely came from, well, why couldn't we do that? So sometimes daring yourself to do a thing is a really good way for coming up with a vision. Okay, great. How about stories from the audience? It's not just the panelists. Yes,
so
Robert, and shout real loud.
I was thinking about how what you just said relates to the funding questions from yesterday.
Okay.
So part of strategy and envisioning for us is to get our researchers to say, we could not have done X without the research technologies, for instance, what I'll call it you. Or we could not have done X without Big Red 2 supercomputer, and those comments up to the people who pay for the funding. So part of strategy and visioning, I think, is making sure that, yes, they're happy, and when they are happy, that they're talking about it amongst themselves, so you get more users. You know, in news stories, when they're talking about their research, I could not have done it without X. So I think that's important.
Right, so sometimes these are referred to as love letters. And getting love letters from your researchers can be absolutely mission critical to continuing to be able to get things done. Okay, so let me move on to the next question, which is hiding on my phone here. Okay, so turning to strategic thinking, can you give some examples of how you use strategic thinking to resolve an issue or a need for your organization or for your researchers? Let's go down the line.
So I just want to say I'm a little bit surprised that Henry asked me to be on this panel because, like Kim, I often feel like I don't know what I'm doing.
So the magic secret to that is neither does anyone else. So how many of you suffer from imposter syndrome? Okay, so look around, put your hand up again. Look around the room and notice that everybody else in the room has the same problem. The reason you suffer from imposter syndrome is not because you're an imposter, it's because your baseline for what an expert is laughably out of whack, right? What makes someone an expert?
Not time doing something.
And how much more time have they been doing something than you in order that they're a bigger expert than you are?
2 weeks.
5 minutes. Is anybody here, okay, so some of us are faculty. How many of you are faculty? Have you ever taught a course where you were 1 hour ahead of your students? How many of you have done that, right? Okay. Do you reveal to the students that you're 1 hour ahead of them? So they think you're a big expert, right? Because you're 1 hour ahead, right? So you have to let go of the idea that an expert is someone who knows what they're talking about. An expert is someone who knows more than you do. And it doesn't have to be a lot more. The first time an employee of this university, the student came to me and asked for career advice. And this was before I became faculty. I was just a grunt. I was a mere cog in a machine. And a student came to me and asked me for career advice. And I felt like an idiot giving career advice, because what did I know? But what I figured out after talking to that student was I knew more than they did. And that's why they came to me. They didn't come to me because I knew more than everybody. They came to me because I knew more than them. How many of you know more than other people about a particular topic that you are responsible for? Of course you do. Why do you know more than them? Because you actually do it, right? You don't have to be a super worldwide expert to be useful. You just have to know more than them, and you can't help but know more than them because you have done it and they haven't. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So as far as strategic planning or visioning, what was it?
We're on strategic thinking.
Strategic thinking. So yeah, the university system in North Dakota a couple years ago, or the state legislature should say, directed the institutions to combine all their IT services in order to save funds. It also came out of a minor issue that developed at one of the smaller universities where they felt that if the institutions were sharing IT infrastructure, that problem wouldn't have occurred. So I work in the context of, we have two different research universities in North Dakota. There's pressure from the state legislature and state board of higher ed to combine IT infrastructure where possible. But then I also have to look out for my university's interests in that if we're going to have, we're going to be an R2 school shooting for R1 status, we feel we need to have our own research computing infrastructure. And so basically I try to plan that anything I do will support the state's goal of, at some level, combining our expertise with the other research institutions. I also leverage our university system's IT infrastructure, partially because a couple of years ago they shifted all of our IT structure from the university over to the university system. But we take everything into consideration. Any strategic plans I make have to address that issue of how what I'm doing is leveraging the combined assets of the entire university system. In addition to that, UND itself has a fragmented IT infrastructure, and so each section, and before the budget cuts came, was sort of fighting for dollars, trying to expand its area of influence. After the budget cuts came, they were all looking for a way to save money and partner up with assets on our campus. So I changed my thinking in that I started to try to look at how I could distribute some of our support to those individual IT departments around campus. Excuse me. So that instead of me being first contact for the high performance computing systems, that those individual IT departments could provide first contact and facilitate them getting onto our resources. And that in the future, our job will be to enable those independent IT departments on helping their researchers get started on board our systems. That said, I just started that process, and hopefully that will, our CIO likes that approach and sort of put her blessing on following that plan. So that's kind of how I've been strategically envisioning our future.
Great, thanks.
As I mentioned, I am brand new. I started my job July 1st. And one of the things that I did, I started thinking about, what's happening in the area of Black studies or women's studies or any type of ethnic studies programs. And whether or not individuals in these programs are actually using, doing any big data projects or using supercomputing to actually get their work done. I decided in the area, and it's very few where that's happening. So my strategy is to expose undergraduate students in this field, working with the IT individuals on campus. I don't know who we have at UCSB in campus. I know that there is a University of California-wide initiative to actually do work with big data. Are you involved with that one, Israel?
Not involved, but we know there's some community to be.
Yes.
The UC-wide sales.
That's right, yeah. So there is, what I did was I wrote a proposal to the Vice Chancellor of Research about how this can happen. And as a result, we ended up possibly with a postdoc eventually that will be placed with the intersection of Black studies as well as cluster computing or big data. So I think the strategy is to expose individuals to any type of big data projects, collaborate with them, ideally work with the IT people on campus also. Don't know what's happening there. I know when I was at UNLV, I had a tough time connecting with the infrastructure there. They were too focused on the enterprise side and not doing enough with faculty. I tried my best when I was there, but I kept running up a brick wall. So you guys just hearing the faculty side of it, it's really, really hard sometimes to get through to the get going. And this is also true, even when I was at NCSA. And it has to do with human resources. So I think you got to think about in terms of who are the people that I need involved with this project. How do I approach them? You can't have too many people involved because guess what? Nothing gets done when you have too many people. Just to target the, whether it's the Vice Chancellor of Research, because that's who my direct line is, was at UNLV, it's also at UC Santa Barbara. And I wrote this long proposal about why this is important in terms of Black studies, because that's where my faculty line is, and that's where I'm focused on any ethnic studies program. I think we need to have more women and underrepresented groups, again, in this area. I look around this room and I'm like, okay, who's missing here? It's very important to me. I know NCSA has focused on it. So it is a strategy, I think, that people talk about. And I mean, it's not an action necessarily, but I think that my strategy is to turn it into an action, to make sure that we are exposed to it, because exposure has everything to do with it. Because a lot of people think it's not possible, and you have to start thinking about what are the possibilities. And you have architects, you have artists, and what I mean by that is people think very different. And I'll just take you guys through a little exercise that I do with students. I'd like for you to walk down the hallway and pick up the book. It's Ulysses. All right, go get Ulysses by James Joyce. It's located 2 doors down the hallway. How would you go about getting that book off the shelf and bringing it back to me? I have people write it down, and every person is different and how they would approach that problem. And I think we all can talk about, well, is there a right way or wrong way? There's neither a right or wrong way of approaching the problem. You have to approach it the way you would approach it else, and figure out how you're going to go about getting that book or achieving those goals. Because I think too many times people try to be someone else, and we can't be. And I know the way I think about things, I know that I have to have a group of people, always, at least a team, that's going to help me, because I'm not a detailed person. I can't stand it. But I am what I call a creative problem solver. And I think that you have to start thinking, well, who are the creative problem solvers that I have, and how can they help me think about these things? Or whether I'm a more detail-focused person, and who do I need to speak to in order to accomplish these goals? And I think that that's how you do it, because it takes more than one brain. It takes a lot of individuals to strategically sit down, talk about what are the problems, how do I address the problem. And people, everybody always have a different insight that can help support you in your goal and the way you think about things. So get a good leader, and also leadership, and I mean in every way that you're thinking. whether it's the problem-solving part or the detail part, because that has helped me a lot.
So my example of strategic thinking. Several years ago in the prior administration with the federal government, there was this thing called the Holder memo that was released. And the spirit of this memo was that any publicly funded research, the data was to be released, and the research with that was to be released, and the methods and anything that came of that, unless there was a good reason not to. So USGS knew this was coming, and part of that was that we have groups that focus on those things, data management policies, the group that works with writing a data management plan for NSF. There's some people on our group that help develop some of those strategies and ways of doing it. Work with the University of California, I think, to build the data management plan website, whatever it was. But anyway, they knew that that was coming, and then when it officially was released, of course, there was never any funding to do that. So, and then within, heavy-duty scientific research at a national continental scale, there's always data volumes that are significant. So it's not a 2 gig data set; it's a 2 terabyte or 10 terabyte data set that gets released. So we had applications that were able to release smaller data sets, but as we started thinking about and working about what the spirit of the memo meant, you start walking back and things start to snow and make it more seamless to the researchers that are actually doing the research, writing the papers, writing the code, and making the decisions, or that then inform the policies that come out of things. So as a research computing center, we had needs for more data storage. We never have enough storage, and that's just the fact of life. It's directly responsible for implementing the spirit of the memo. They needed a way to release data publicly, and then the survey management was all on, their feet are being held to the fire. Knowing what's going on, paying attention to the news, paying attention to things that come out, reading some of the emails from your upper management, subscribing to mailing lists that talk about some of these policy changes that in Washington, D.C. We kind of were thinking ahead of the game and thinking, okay, we have several products in mind, different vendors that can help solve this problem. We knew some of the vendors and we had communicated with them, anticipating this was coming down. We started a sales job because it's truly what it was with our management to plant the seed for funding coming through. To say, okay, we're going to need to think about how to solve this, and we think we can do this with, quote, minimal expense. And this will feed in this application and that application, and then also opens up different avenues should decisions be made with the next administration or the following administration that we have now. If there's a shift, we're still safe in what we do. So we had to do a lot of communication, a lot of demonstration that we thought about all of the avenues things could go wrong and still would come out not sinking a lot of money or still in the middle of this project today, but it's going to be a 10-year project. It'll never be done because most of our stuff is keeping data in perpetuity, which means never get rid of it. So we're a 150-year-old organization, so we have to think about those things. And some of this stuff is demonstrating that we can reproduce a data set from 10 years ago with some sort of.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yes.
You said we. A group of how many people?
So at the technical level of this project, there's 3 of us. At the policy and workflow level, there's probably 5 or 6 people that understand this. And then we also do engagement with our research staff to say, and what part of facilitation is learning from your research staff too, so that you see their problems, you understand their problems. And us being facilitators, see more of the technical computing problems that research staff has, and you can kind of amplify or congregate all these problems into a few solutions. So it's we being the entire organization, but us on the forefront of the
Did you reach out to the researchers, or did the researchers come to you? How did that work in order to get that collected?
So our researchers are pretty vocal about their problems. So there was not much research or outreach we needed to do. All we had to do was open our listening ears and say, okay, we hear you. Some honest feedback from them to say, okay, these aren't working, but these are, so let's concentrate on things that are working. How can we fix the things that are broken? It's all about the communication and being honest with what you're hearing.
Well, I'll just say that my personal strategy over the last couple of years has really revolved around communication, and I think that this echoes what so we've done some things broadly within ITS, such as creating an ITS communications working group, where we're looking actively at better ways in which we can disseminate information out to campus and how we can retrieve feedback on that information and make better strategic judgments as a result. And so as a specific example of kind of how we've integrated better strategic thinking into our planning, is that a couple of years ago when I started at Lafayette, they were finalizing plans to construct a new integrated sciences center on campus, and it's in the midst of being constructed right now. But one of the things that we noticed a couple of years ago was that there was a room on the blueprints that was designated as a data visualization center. And there wasn't much guidance provided in terms of what that space might ultimately entail. And so ITS likely could have worked largely internally to come up with what that might be, but we saw this as an opportunity instead to reach out to potential stakeholders who might be using that space or might have ideas of their own about what that space might become. And the conversations that we've had over the last couple of years with faculty, with staff, with even talking through them with their community partners about how such a space might be used to enhance our town-gown relations, for instance, have been really interesting and have taken us down a road that will end up, I think, with a space that helps to align with Lafayette's vision of becoming a leader in STEM-focused liberal arts. So yes, internally we had ideas or thoughts about what that space could be, but it wasn't until we really got the faculty involved, the staff involved, and started to have conversations, brought in vendors for sort of tech shows and had people come and touch and feel and look and experience what we could do in there, that we were able to craft a space that is going to further the strategic vision and reach of the college. And so we've really taken this on in a really purposeful way, at least I have within my own work. And this has grown out of my experience of being very high touch, but realizing that even decisions on things like equipment and space and workflows and stuff like that must involve a large cadre of stakeholders being able to provide really honest feedback to us. And so I would say that just for my own personal strategic vision and thinking, communication is at the forefront of that, and it has only increasingly become so over the last couple of years. So that's kind of where I'm standing with that.
Can you actually keep it, because I'm loud, so hopefully the people out in TV land can hear me reasonably well. And I will say I have never been smart enough to have a strategy. I'm not even smart enough to have a plan. All I've ever been able to muster up is an approach, a way of doing things. And that seems to be sufficient to muddle along. But a core part of my strategic thinking is trying to war game out how others will react to whatever it is that I'm planning or thinking about doing. Trying to guess based on incredibly limited information. By the way, do we ever have enough information to make good decisions? No. Bob Panoff at Shodor, for those of you who may have met him, has a great saying about this. He says, in high school, they taught us how to find exact solutions to exact problems, right? They give you the equation, they say, find the approximate problems. I don't know what the question is, but if you don't have the right answer by Tuesday, you're fired. Right? How many of you have had that posed to them, by the way? Typically not in those words, right? I don't know what the question is, but get it right. Really? I'm the only one?
No.
Okay, good. All right. So, and anybody who's written a grant proposal has faced this dilemma, right? Because the information in the program announcement is always laughably incomplete, especially the first year, because the first year they don't know what they want, let alone you figure out what they want. You're always facing this problem of not enough information, and so you have to start asking yourself, the people who are going to make decisions, what are the drivers that they use to make those decisions? What do they care about? And how can I craft my thing to fit within what they care about? So do people want to take a minute and talk about an example where they crafted a thing, or at least the presentation of that thing, in a way that they knew would resonate with the people who would be making the decisions about it? People have stories like that to tell?
And they liked it?
Yeah, I like success stories, but if you have a failure story that has a useful lesson, that's fine too.
So the federal government likes reporting and likes metrics. It doesn't know what metrics are or what metrics they want. So we, being my group, has tried to anticipate numbers that look pretty on a graph. And we collect a lot of things. We collect scheduler statistics, we collect machine statistics, things that are pretty cut and dry. And we present these on slides to our management. And inevitably, there is something that goes up the chain, whether it's Office of Management Budget or whether it's Department of Interior, it doesn't matter, that they don't like what they see, whether our numbers, the graph points down or whether the graph points up. It's always the wrong direction. And it doesn't matter what the numbers mean. And we've tried to do other things where, okay, we hear you, and we try to do other things. Maybe it's the number of publications we've put out. Maybe it's the number of publications we've influenced. Maybe it's the number of this or that. It sounds good on it to a logical person, but as the churning of the bureaucracy moves forward, it always gets twisted and somehow comes back and bites you. I haven't figured this game out yet, so I can't tell you the right answer, but I can say no matter what you do, it's going to be wrong.
That's a fair point.
Well, I'm one of these people that's direct. So I directly go to the source and talk about what my needs are with the data. I explain to my administration, here's the situation. I look at what the problems are, how can we address them, and I do a presentation. People like presentations and they like numbers, as you said. They like data, and every time I say, this is what we need and this is why we need it. And I've been pretty successful. When I was the Associate Dean of Research, we had a 2-person office. When I left, there were 9 people in the office. I went to the Vice Chancellor's office and I said, if you're really interested in getting a return on your investment, you need to invest first. And I gave the argument on why that was important. And if, the reason that faculty were not submitting grant proposals is because there was no infrastructure. So basically, she didn't know that she didn't know. So there was nothing getting done. And the person that was the Associate Dean of Research at that time also didn't know that he didn't know and didn't get anything done. So you have to have some type of knowledge on what that means. And what I mean by that is you have to have someone that's had some experience with submitting grants have an idea on what's needed in order to accomplish your goals. And that's what I made the argument for when I went up there, is that we need more people. I ended up getting 9 graduate students to work in the office, as well as a grant person, a pre-grant and post-grant coordinator working the budget. I'm like, what? It was something that was foreign to me because I had never done my own budget. They get a lot of money because they have someone to support them with that process. And eventually, as I say, I got the positions, so I was successful in that, and it did increase the revenue in terms of grant submissions with the goals. So that's just the story. I just go directly to the source, but that's just me. Yes, it's real.
The graduate students, what they doing?
They were working with faculty. Like some of them would actually go out and do literature searches for faculty for their grant proposals. Some actually helped me. I had one that helped with budgets. I had several that would just work with, mostly around the research, help supporting the faculty to get the research done, because sometimes faculty may have an idea and they have no idea even where to start in terms of the research. And we were training. Students were getting experience and looking things up and doing literature searches, and not necessarily complete literature reviews, but the search. Like I asked one to actually look at what are the STEM programs like for, males in this area, and whether it's engineering. You give them something specific to look for, and they would find all the articles and they would annotate the articles, and then we could actually take those and integrate it into the proposals. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Okay.
What's the question again?
I've already forgotten.
Oh, okay. So
Something that's been successful.
something that's been successful. I don't know if this is going to be successful, but yeah, I have the problem where I'm supposed to centralize IT, but also over the years I've been frustrated that I have, the College of Engineering has a lot of Windows users who, it's just difficult with the amount of staff support that I could offer to get them trained. In the end, though, right now with the size of workstations and whatnot, the real bottleneck to a lot of those applications are just access to a large amount of RAM. So taking that into consideration, and taking into consideration that the state wants us to centralize IT infrastructure, and also the fact that the whole centralized IT plays into the fact that the state really wants to push everything in the cloud, and I mean everything, right? So I constantly get asked the question, can we do this in the cloud? How much of what you're doing now can we put into the cloud? And I don't know, not everybody probably knows this, but our current governor is a former Microsoft employee of some stature. And his big thing is also pushing stuff in the cloud because, from where he came from, that's a huge asset. And so to try to address everything, for the last 4 years or so, I've been trying to get deploy a cloud at our institution. So I think the one plus of not really feeling like you know what you're doing, it sort of gives you the freedom to dream big, right? To think about solutions that you might want to try that maybe you're a little bit crazy, but you don't know any better, so you're going to try anyway. So I submitted 3 NSF proposals trying to get a cloud, and I pitched the idea to our university. And in the end, I think being better reviews on the MRI proposals, but I didn't get funding from them. But I did get funding from the university to deploy our cloud. And I think the difference is that the university knows me and plays into the fact that they trust me a little bit better than I trust myself, and I just haven't made a good case at NSF yet that I know what I'm doing well enough to be trusted with $1 million worth of funds. So anyway, we bought a brand new setup this spring. It's taking a little bit longer to deploy than I'd hoped, but with the next month or two, we'll have a fully functional OpenStack cloud that will also support lots of big data software stacks. And success of that cloud is up in the air right now as far as, will it address the issues that I'm hoping it will address. But the fact that I got funding for it all is a success.
All right, that's fantastic. We got a couple of questions from Zoomland. So first of all, what's your strategy with goal setting in light of having multiple stakeholders such as faculty, VP or VC of research, CIO, and so on, and the greater mission of the institution and of your organization? That is, when you are trying to grow your program and the stakeholders have varying understanding of what your group does and is responsible for, how do you set objectives for the year, for the program, etc., and still feel as if you're making progress and being seen as successful?
I would like to say that I have enough time to actually come up with goals. My overarching goal all the time is, can I have more money for staff? Because if I can have more money for staff, I would have time to start planning other goals that we could achieve. I will say that a lot of the direction that I've taken over the last couple of years has come down from the state legislature, from the State Board of Higher Ed, and a lot of the goals that they to meet, whether it's budget cuts or increasing cyber infrastructure so that we can increase our research funding and have an economic impact on the state. So I don't have a good answer for that question, but I'm always asking for more money.
I think, as Aaron mentioned, I've consistently said resources, human resources. My goal, I would say, my goal, no matter where I am, is to do things that's never been done before. And has not been done to my knowledge, and how can I do this where I am? So that's always the goal. And of course, the goal is to increase, for me, increase underrepresented groups and women in STEM fields. And I plan to do this, even if it's one at a time.
So I'm going to give away some of my dirty little secrets here.
Oh, good.
I have 2 goals. I have the goal we put on paper, and usually those are about an inch off the ground, that we amongst ourselves can say, oh, there's no doubt we could smash that. And then there's the realistic goals that we keep among ourselves as a team. Oftentimes, the goals you put on paper, either just in the game of telephone and the bureaucracy gets twisted a little bit, or events beyond your control happen that you can't meet those goals. So you do the best you can, because if you fail to meet the goal, then there's problems sometimes. But then inside in your internal goals, the stuff that's not written down on paper but are communicated with in meetings or just general attitude that you have is.
So this is a little more active in the sense of, if you start from the top with the goals of the college or the university or the institution or whatever. And if those roll downhill in a very systematic way, so for instance, where the CIO says, okay, we need to come up with goals for ITS that align and contribute to the goals of the college, and then directs his or her managers, team leaders, directors to work with their respective teams to all come up with goals. Because most of the places I've been, we each have roughly 3 goals that we're working on in any given year. And just ensuring that those consistently feed back up into goals that originally are designed to propel the college forward, so that we're always thinking about what is the vision of the college, what is the mission of the college in my case, and how do we align our priorities and our expectations for the coming year with those, then that makes it really easy to justify the choices that we make in terms of other things like budgeting, in terms of human resource allocation, in terms of prioritization, because if they speak to our goals, those goals have been specifically crafted to align, all sort of fall into place in terms of, you know, not having to justify something that seems outside of where the institution is generally heading. So that's what we try to do. That's what I try to do personally with my goals, is to find ways that they align with the broader trajectories of the college. And then when I need to make an ask that helps me further my goals, almost by default, those are going to fall in line with what the college is trying to do. That's not always possible. It's not always super clean. It doesn't work out that way 100% of the time. But I do think it's important to try to keep goals focused on an individual level at what the broader level is doing. And that is sometimes easier said than done, but that's what we try to do.
Great. Okay, so I have another question from Zoomland. Is there any value to standardizing and or distributing the metrics that the grant reviewers will accept? Do the metrics vary from one review to the next?
I have a better answer. I don't do much grant writing.
Let's be a little broader then. Whenever you're going to be presenting metrics to deciders.
Well, yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I think it goes to our discussion that we had yesterday evening, and I know that there's a lot of new people on who may not have tuned in for that. I find myself thinking about that a lot. So again, since I am the low person on the totem pole in most cases, whenever I'm putting together a report, a request, a justification for something, I have one shot to get that as right as it can be. And this goes to what we were discussing earlier on the panel, in that it really is coming up with fuzzy solutions to very large fuzzy questions. And all I can do is the best I can do at that. And so the metrics that I choose to use, or the standards by which I'm kind of basing my ultimate proposal on, it's going to go up the chain often. It's going to go to my supervisor. It's going to ultimately go to the CIO, and then that may find its way to deans of research. It may find its way into the cabinet. It may find its way ultimately to the board of trustees in one form or another. And I'm not in the room when those conversations are happening. And they're never going to pick up the phone and call me to say, hey, what did you mean when you wrote this? Or what are you trying to say? Or did you consider X? They're just going to take what I say at face value and make judgments about funding, about requests, about equipment, about people, based on what I've said. And so I don't know quite how to get that right. And it's something that, proverbially keeps me up at night when I'm trying to think, what's the best way that I can communicate this? Because faculty are going to see this, other staff are going to see it, peer institutions may ultimately see this in one form or another. So I think that that's a super interesting question that doesn't have a great answer. It's like many of the questions that we're wrestling with this week. They're important questions, they're critical to how we do our jobs and to how our institutions function, but we don't have clear answers on them. At least I don't. So I just, I have to look at what our peers are doing, what the institutions that we purport to want to be like or align ourselves with are doing, and try to make decisions that will bring us into leadership roles in that cadre. It doesn't always work, but I think it's a valuable exercise to try to go through.
Yeah, so metrics are, people, I hate to say us, I speak for people who are computer based, that the view is that, oh, there are standard metrics throughout, but those metrics that are easy to standardize don't translate to the business decisions or the science needs or the funding decision makers perspective. And I think standardizing those would be fantastic if we could, but this has probably been going on centuries now to figure out how to make best decisions and standardized ways to do that. And I don't think that they exist today, but if somebody can come up with a way to do it, I think it'd be fantastic. I think one form of currency maybe is like publications or dollars per CPR or something like that. But then that also depends on the mission of your agency too. So I don't know. I mean, I would love to see that. I just don't know if that's an achievable goal.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up on that? I think this goes to what you were saying, that it's dangerous when we start to talk about return like that, because dollars per CPU, when we're talking about something like, you know, say humanities or Black studies or other social sciences or whatnot, may not be quite as measurable in that way as, say, what you might find from STEM fields. And so I think that there needs to be an entire resetting of metrics that we use to determine the worth of research and what is worthy of pursuing and devoting our time to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think metrics are like ice cream shops. In other words, how many different ice cream shops do we have? Even in Oklahoma City? And all of them probably serve vanilla, right? And guess what? Everyone has a preference. But that, so I think listening, hearing what people say they like, hearing what people say they want to see, talking to different people can give you some insight into type of metrics that might be needed, but you can never standardize something like that. You just can't, because no matter how many people look at it, there's always going to be some more questions. So I would say just go with it and do the best that you can and do your research, because I think that's what I would look at as a researcher is, you know, have they done their research? Metrics at all. But I think you're going to always have someone that comes back that have another question. It's just impossible. Yes.
So I just want to add in, so the University of Buffalo received the OSF grant a couple years ago to help identify scientific impact and return on investment for this. We got $9 million grant at their center. They're trying to use their, you guys heard of XT-Mod? XT-Mod is, I didn't know what it stands for. C.
It's a cluster management.
Yeah,
It's a monitoring system for high performance computing.
so they want to take their monitoring system and tie it into your back-end grant process at your university, so you can have easier ways to compute the graphics and numbers for your university. That is that you're paying them to do this for us. Just trying to standardize some of these things.
Isn't that's Thomas Forlani, right?
Tom Filani, yeah.
Isn't he going to be a panelist?
I think so. That's correct.
Okay.
And he was at the PERC conference a couple weeks ago as well. Yeah. So he's definitely worth hearing from and has a lot of knowledge about this stuff for sure. So I will tell you my own opinion. I despair of any standardization. Part of that is if we knew how to do it, it wouldn't be research. So, and some years ago, I remember having a conversation with an IT person in the context of research computing, but it was an enterprise IT person at another institution. Process that we were using to determine some of this stuff, because much of the process that we were using, I think the technical term in the social studies world was ethnographic. We'd go around and talk to people about stuff, and we would have no set agenda. We wanted to find out what they thought was important, not impose on them what we thought was important. And he thought that was an incredibly nonsensical way to discover anything useful. From his perspective, we needed to have very well-defined quantitative metrics, and if we couldn't articulate what those quantitative metrics were, then we didn't know what we were talking about, and the whole exercise was a complete waste of time. In my experience, the fraction of research computing where you can do what he wanted us to be doing is not literally zero, but it's awfully close. Most of what we're doing, yes, they're metrics. Okay, so we mentioned, for example, grant dollars. We mentioned publications. Well, the expectation of grant dollars varies enormously, not just by discipline, but by sub-discipline and sub-sub-discipline. And the way that those dollars come about and are distributed. So Horst Severini just stepped out for a moment. Oh, just came to the other side to get more coffee. There we go. He's in the high energy physics business, and that is a distributed worldwide collaboration with what, 150 countries, give or take, and something like 3,000 scientists, all of whom are very bad software developers, for the record. And the software beautifully reflects that. But their way of doing things is when they publish something, that publication has what, 3,000 co-authors?
Yeah, Atlas does and CMS does too.
Right. So, whereas in some disciplines, the expectation, especially for people who are not yet tenured, is that they have a large number of single author publications or they publish a book, right? That's completely the opposite of what Horst's field does. With the dollars, if you are in certain engineering disciplines, getting a six-figure grant is normal. If you are in a humanities discipline, getting a six-figure grant is not literally unheard of, but the number of faculty in your department who've done it is vanishingly small, right? So, yes, there are metrics, and we do collect those metrics. We absolutely collect and brag on grant dollars facilitated and publications facilitated. But we know that the only way to measure that is whole institution, because if we try to measure it discipline by discipline, some of the disciplines will quite rightly say, we're expected to produce one publication every year, not one a month, and another discipline, my own discipline, computer science, will say, conference publications are almost as good as journal articles. Whereas almost every other discipline will say that's laughable, right? We don't even count conference publications. You can put it on your CV, but put it in the back. Nobody's going to get that far in, right? There's a huge variety, just within the academic world, of the
from the university, and it's been that I was able to help people get unexpected grant dollars. And when they got unexpected grant dollars, all of a sudden the VPR's office took a much. The other thing is like everybody's saying here, I think you got two types of people who care about metrics, and some people care a lot about very quantitatively descriptive. Encourage us to capture publications and grant dollars brought in. I just haven't had the resources to do that. But with our new approach to things, our IT departments that we're working with are supposed to funnel that back to me so that I have that information. Our statistical usage of the cluster. So, user X used the cluster for 20 hours on 10 cores. Because even if that, I think some people in the administration only care about the grant dollars. They look at metrics and they're like, it's like, if this isn't impacting the amount of money we bring in, why do I care about these metrics? But if you have those metrics, I think the people who do care about your university will be much more likely to go to bat for you, and it will actually see the potential for more dollars, larger impact. So that's the reason why I actually want to.
Okay, and as it turns out, we're right on the border of the break anyway. So we're right at I think we're like 1 minute ahead of, yes, we are. It's 10:14, and I believe our stopping time is 10:15. So I'm going to give you back now half a minute of your life.
5 seconds.
5 seconds of your life. I'm not going to give back any of your life, but we are going to take a break. Is from 10:15 to 10:45. By the way, this is probably the only time the whole week when we will start and end the break at the correct time. That will never again happen. So I'm warning you about that now. But we're going to take our break. People in TV land, we're going to keep the Zoom thing live the whole time, so don't worry about that going away. Just stick around with us, get yourself a cup of coffee, answer some email, and we will be back at 10:45, or let's call it 45 minutes on the hour, whatever time zone you're in, to start our next session. So we look forward to talking to you all then. And let's thank our panel.